The decade of the 2160s provided huge benefits to the fledgling Aegis program. The habitable third planet of the Proxima Centauri system became Earth's first extrasolar colony, and thousands of eager settlers flowed forth from Earth looking for a new start. Other nearby systems, such as Orion, Ceti Gamma, and Beta 7, were claimed and occupied by rival corporations, and farther out, new outposts were constructed in places like Beta Durrani, Deneb, Sirius, Jericho, Vega, and Cinzor. The Earth Alliance purchased Jumpgate technology from the Centauri in 2161, and Earth Force quickly engineered its own jump-capable exploration craft. The original Oracle hull, the EAS Argo, set out on its maiden voyage in 2163 and established many of the earliest traditions of the Deep Space Exploration Command. In addition to locating potential colonies at Vega, New London, and Altair, the EAS Argo and those ships that followed her met with new races like the Corlions, Torata, and Casker, plus mapped dangerous regions of hyperspace that precluded further study. One unfortunate side effect of this was a cessation of further exploration spinward, near the edge of the galactic arm, due to treacherous regions of hyperspace in that area. Had Earth vessels proceeded in that direction, they might have met the Minbari under less aggressive circumstances. While all of this was going on, Earth Force undertook a crash course in the development of an interstellar space navy. Using components bought from the Centauri and other races, technologies found on distant worlds, and information gathered from other means, Earth's military began to rapidly grow. In power, a major element of this growth was the Starfury program, designed to develop Earth's first non-atmospheric fighter intended solely for interstellar use. Cheap Delta-class fighters, still in use by the Belt Alliance, could operate easily from carriers or ground bases, but these craft were adequate only for a short-range role and could not hope to stand up to a real starfighter. In 2168, the Starfury program bore fruit in the form of the Ares Heavy Fighter, though most people simply referred to the new design simply as a Starfury. This tradition would continue throughout the project's still ongoing lifetime. In addition to this capable fighter, the Alliance also deployed its first real interstellar task force in 2168. Charged with defending the Proxima colony and Earth's growing network of outposts, this group included the Epimetheus-class command ship, the first Terran combat vessel capable of initiating its own jump vortex, as well as early versions of the Hermes Courier, Artemis frigate, Orestes dreadnought, later Monitor, and Tethys frigate. All these vessels were slow and clunky, with weak thrusters and inadequate engines for their missions, but they were literally all Earth had to offer. Their weapons, however, were far more impressive for such a youthful race, including plasma cannons, particle weapons, missile racks, and blast cannons purchased or otherwise acquired from the Centauri and neighboring races. The first Alliance ships did not look like much when maneuvering, but at close ranges they really packed a wallop. Their operational deployment also came at just the right time. The rapidly growing corporations, eager to make a buck, wherever possible, were beginning to infringe upon the territory of neighboring races, and not all of them appreciated the upstart Earthers and their expansionistic attitude. While some lodged formal protests with the Alliance over these gung-ho surveyors, a few reacted more aggressively. The first of these was the Chlonus Directorate. The Chlonus occupied only a single system, but it was directly in the path of Earth's access to the Tokati, a friendly race looking to establish a viable trade route. The Chlonus made no attempt to diplomatically protest the construction of such a route, but instead attacked Earth's outpost at Deneb, then known as the Signet Station, with a cruiser group in April 2169. In this historic first meeting of Earth Force units against an alien foe, the Epimetheus cruiser EAS Asia was heavily damaged and the outpost itself destroyed. While the hardy Ares fighters fought valiantly to delay the Chlonus, the Asia and a fleet of shuttles managed to rescue a quarter of the station's crew before the base finally broke apart under concentrated enemy fire. Earth was forced to abandon the system, and the Chlonus deactivated the jump beacon without delay. In the time it took the Alliance to bring another jump-capable cruiser into the region, Earth's diplomatic corps managed to defuse the dangerous situation. With only a few dozen ships in the region, most of these light frigates and police craft, Earth was in no position to fight the technologically superior colony. Since all the colony wanted was to be left in peace, and the active Signet beacon was a threat to that peace, the solution was simply to not reactivate said beacon. This left the colony satisfied, and a nervous Earth force backed cautiously away from its first interstellar conflict. Many lessons were learned from the incident. The Ares fighters had been particularly successful, but were deployed in too few numbers to turn the battle. The EAS Asia was so badly damaged that it had to be decommissioned, but was quickly replaced by the new beta model of the Epimetheus class, which operated a more powerful suite of weapons and the prototype of Earth's first interceptor weapons. Interceptors, developed through technology located by the IPX Corporation during a survey of a long-abandoned alien outpost, was another high point in the Aegis program and was one of the primary advances made to Earth's Navy during the period. Interceptors were the first weapon capable of dramatically increasing the defensive firepower of naval vessels, and were instrumental in freeing up fighters from the traditional escort role to intercept and strike missions. However, perhaps the most important lesson learned was that a quiet neighbor can be a dangerous neighbor. By this point, Earth territory had expanded to the point where it bumped up against a number of alien races. Open trade was underway with the friendly Mentabans, Markub and Centauri, while border treaties had also been signed with the Vri, Deneth, Sh Lassans, and just recently, the Colony. There was, however, one other race of significant concern, and that was the Chlonus. The Chlonus were a former Centauri subject race who valued their own independence and security over just about any other. 1L. Concern. Earth ships attempting to set up trade relations were fired upon and forced to retreat without any attempt at dialogue. The Chlonus made no argument when Earth claimed the nearby systems of Deneb and Seti Gamma, but there was one additional system the Alliance had its eye on, Beta 7, home to a wealth of minerals and resources greatly in need as raw materials for Earth's growing colonization program. Surveyors found no evidence of a foreign claim to the system, despite its proximity to Chlon, so the Alliance decided to take control and hope for the best. After what happened at Signet Station, Earth moved into Beta 7 with great care and deliberation. After publicly broadcasting their peaceful intentions in the area, Earth Force assigned the Avenger Carrier Group to defend the system and began the process of building a mining station. From the beginning, Chlonus ships menaced this process, undertaking numerous close-range passes to gather information, but stopping short of actual armed combat. In response, Earth Force constructed heavier fortifications around the mining facilities, including rudimentary defense satellites and ground-based laser batteries to go along with orbital fighter asset. However, when Earth finally began construction of an early Orion-class starbase in late 2169, they finally forced the Chlonus into action. Unwilling to permit the existence of a nearby base capable of supporting a strike into their home system, the Chlonus attacked in force in late January of the following year. They were met by a well-prepared and heavily armed Alliance task group consisting of the carrier Avenger, the Artemis-class heavy frigates Merrimack and Lincoln, and a veritable horde of Ares-class starfaries. Chlonus tactics of the time depended upon use of their ships and fighters in a combined sweeping passes, but time and again the Ares groups drew off defending Chlonus fighters into spectacular dogfights, forcing the destroyer group and supporting frigates to break off and regroup. In the end, the Chlonus retreated after losing most of their fighters, and while neither side lost a ship, none of those involved escaped the fight without at least some damage. The Earth Alliance responded to this unprovoked attack with outrage, but the Chlonus remained characteristically silent. Instead of suing for peace, they seemed content to enter a period of Cold War with their enemies. Earth continued to fortify Beta 7, completing the Orion base in late 2170 and assigning additional ships to defend the system. Meanwhile, the Chlonus continued to raid the outpost and neighboring trade routes, although they made no attempt at military strikes against the vital supply line between Beta 7 and Sol. It was not until decades later that Earth Force agents discovered just how much of a paper tiger the Chlonus military really was. The vast majority of their ships were lightweight hulls reverse-engineered after the Republic's departure from its former slave state, and even at Earth's level of inferiority, the Alliance had equal or perhaps even better weapons overall than the Chlonus did. Earth could easily have conquered Chlon had they possessed the desire and courage to do so, but of course the Alliance had no intention of becoming an imperialistic nation. In retrospect, this was probably a good attitude to have, and only added to the later developed Terran reputation of being a race not willing to start wars, but perfectly capable of finishing them. As the Earth Alliance steadily grew in power, many among the Centauri Republic began to grow jealous of House Jaddo's improved status. By operating as exclusive traders with the Earthers, Jaddo earned noticeably improved profits and enjoyed a steadily rising level of influence within the Centaurum. While some houses merely wished to establish their own trade relations with the Alliance, others saw House Jaddo as a threat and Earth the key to eliminating that threat. However, as is common within Centauri backroom politics, no direct action was taken. Instead, the disaffected houses began secretly hiring mercenaries and raiders to disrupt the trade lanes between the Alliance and House Jaddo's outposts. In 2172, Earth Force agents discovered evidence directly linking certain Centauri houses with raider activity. Debate raged for some time over what to do. There was no consideration of going to war with the Republic, for any such fight could have only one result. Although Earth's leaders in Geneva were still learning about the intricacies of Centauri politics, they did at least correctly discern that their friends in House Jaddo were not at fault. In secret meetings, Earth's leaders confronted Jaddo with their knowledge and were promised an end to the raids, but in fact, House Jaddo knew about them already and had already chosen to do nothing. The Republic was still in decline, and every house was out to cover its own interests. Jaddo knew that to publicly expose the raids and threaten any sort of action could lead to a disastrous civil war, one they would surely lose. So, instead, they provided only token support in the form of intelligence and technological data, without making any attempt to intervene militarily. Earth's leaders were justifiably annoyed. They had to do something. Already the Centauri raids were spilling over into trade with other star nations. As a result, Earth Force was ordered to gradually build up its forces along the border and aggressively pursue the privateers as far as the trail led, including into sovereign Centauri territory. Previously, Earth forces had stopped at the border, letting raiders escape with their booty, but that practice would henceforth cease. The pirates, desperate to escape, called upon Centauri border patrols to protect them, and incidents began to pile up. In most cases, the Alliance forces so outnumbered Republic pickets that the police craft did not dare intervene, but the raiders soon learned the trick of flying directly towards the nearest military garrison and begging for asylum. The result was a wrist slapping by local authorities and, usually, the return of whatever was stolen, but no reparations for battle damage or destroyed Alliance freighters. Although the Centauri repeatedly protested the violations of their space, Earth continued to aggressively pursue raiding vessels despite the threat of military action. Eventually, things boiled over when an Earth Force fleet opened fire on raiders taking shelter near a Centauri base. The base and picket ships returned fire, and in the resulting battle, most of the Republic's ships were destroyed. As word of this reached Centauri Prime, the Emperor himself finally sat up and took notice. While scattered battles continued on the border, he conducted his own investigation and uncovered the actions of his own people. His response was measured, however, and not nearly as harsh as the Earth Alliance would have liked. The raiding was brought to a halt, and the Emperor issued an apology to Geneva for the actions what was labeled as rogue houses. In addition, He also put an end to the exclusive treaty House Jado had with Earth, opening up the entire Republic to trade with the new and emerging power. Although this infuriated Jado and angered a number of Terran companies getting rich through their virtual trade monopoly, the Emperor smoothed things over by publicly praising the obvious military skill exhibited by Alliance forces during the border skirmishes. This left the average Earth citizen with a feeling of well-deserved pride. During the years that followed, expansion continued and colonization began throughout what was now being known as Earth space. Borders were solidified, and the Alliance began the long process of developing its vast territory. Colonies were founded and grew, outposts and bases were constructed, and new jump gates were placed and added to the expanding hyperspace network. The old Centauri gate orbiting Earth was deactivated and dismantled, replaced by a new one in orbit around Jupiter's moon Io. This move greatly increased the security of the homeworld itself, as any military force approaching the planet would have to make its way to Earth on its own, without a handy jump beacon to point the right way. As time passed, however, problems within the Alliance began to surface. Colonies such as Mars, Proxima, and Deneb began to voice a growing argument for self-government, increasingly believing the desires of the leaders in Geneva were no longer the same as those on their own planet. Independence movements began to surface, and although Earth managed to quell the problem on the smaller colonies, Mars and Proxima proved more difficult. Mars, in particular, chafed under the demands of the capital at Earth Dome. Demonstrations were held across the planet, and no small amount of support appeared at home. The Alliance insisted that humanity's best interests were better served through unity, while Mars replied that Earth's various colonies should be treated as independent federated states, with complete self-determination in all ways but protected by a joint military force, the expenses of which would be shared by all. While Alliance leaders struggled with these latest internal concerns, Earth finally came into contact with the expanding Narn regime. The Narns had thrown off Centauri rule in 2195 and immediately began the process of building an empire of their own, in much the same way as the Earth Alliance had done in the decades following contact with the Republic. However, where Earth was content to occupy unclaimed systems and made no attempt to infringe upon the rights of established races, the Narns had no such compunctions. Space around their homeworld was littered with the remnants of former Centauri slave races, such as the Tachunk and Belosians. In order to achieve the level of power they wanted, the Narns approached these worlds under the guise of liberators, only to turn them into subject peoples once again. In some cases, as with Tachunk, their efforts met with success, but on other worlds, most notably Belos and Chakfaf, Narn invasions, for that was what they truly were repulsed. In due time, the Narns encountered the borders of the Earth Alliance. Relations were not formally established, and the Centauri Republic warned Earth Dome that the Narns were dangerous rebels who could not be trusted. The Narns saw the Earthers as Centauri collaborators, and harassed and raided Earth trading and exploration operations along the border, seemingly proving the Centauri case. In truth, the Narns were merely probing Earth territory and taking the measure of humanity, but the Terrans had no way to be sure of this. However, these incidents did have one significant benefit. They provided an umbrella under which Earth Force could build up its military without arousing the suspicion or ire of the colonies. For several years, warship and ground force production was of paramount importance. Technological advancements continued, and several new starship designs appeared, including the Olympus and Hyperion prototypes, vessels that would later become the backbone of the Earth Navy for most of the early part of the next century. While many of the new task forces were indeed sent to the Narn frontier, many more were held in reserve for use in quelling any civil unrest. This proved to be a wise decision, for in 2212, the Mars colony erupted in open revolt. Rioting broke out in nearly every city, and the Martian underground moved to take control using its own paramilitary armed forces. When Proxima threatened to do the same, Earth began an overwhelming and well-prepared invasion of Mars, crushing all resistance within the space of a few weeks. during the final days of this revolt, when failure became imminent, a fanatic loyal to Mars managed to assassinate President Kiyoshi. This led to a series of punishing sanctions against the breakaway colony, setting a foul tone for Earth-Martian relations for decades. With the threat of civil war abated, the Alliance was free to concentrate on shoring up the Narn border. The primary subject of argument was the Epsilon Indie system, a jumping-off point to Coriana and one of only 2 star systems with easily navigated jump paths into Narn space. The Narns claimed Epsilon Indie, but in doing so conveniently forgot to notice that Earth explorers had mapped and logged the system many years before. Unfortunately, so few resources existed there, at least in comparison with other nearby systems, that Earth never fully developed the area. This, to the Narns, provided the necessary excuse to move in and occupy it for themselves. During the middle part of the 2210s, the Narns occupied the outer planets in Epsilon Indie while Earth took control of the inner world. Both sides constructed their own jump gates and defensive stations, but neither seemed willing to fight over a few relatively useless chunks of rock. The Narn leadership, the Kari, saw Earth's unwillingness to go to war as a weakness, while the Earth Alliance felt that they just didn't know enough about Narn capabilities to risk an armed conflict. Things could not continue in this way for long, however, and finally in 2219 the fight began. Narn ships attacked an Earth cargo vessel on its way to deliver supplies, and reaction was swift. The Earth commander on the scene ordered a full pursuit of the Narns, and soon a general space battle broke out. Reinforcements were rushed to the scene by both sides, and the fight continued sporadically for the next several days until finally the remaining Narns retreated to the protection of their base. The Narns made a serious blunder at this point, however. Instead of sending in 2 newly formed task forces to counterattack at Epsilon Indie, they instead began raiding Earth systems in Eridani and Epsilon. Although they scored some noteworthy damage, they were eventually driven out by defensive picket forces occupying the threatened areas. The only long-term effect the raids had was to allow new Earth Alliance reinforcements to finally overwhelm the Narn defenses in Epsilon Indie, resulting in the destruction of the base and capturing of the jump gate intact. The beacon was then deactivated, cutting off the system from the Narn regime until assaults could be launched under the control of jump-capable command vessels, of which the still young Narn military was in woefully short supply. The Narns continued to harass the Alliance for the next several years, but were never able to seriously threaten Epsilon Indie or the other colonies. This was due in part to the Narn refusal to commit their entire military might against the Alliance, an action that would have seriously weakened their borders with the Centauri, whom they hated with all their hearts. Indeed, any attempted invasion of the Earth Alliance could have only one result: renewed subjugation, for even victory would have won them only a ravaged navy left wide open to attack by the hated Republic. Earth, too, had no interest in a full-scale war, sticking to their anti-imperialist guns and remaining content to fend off Narn attacks in their sovereign space. In the early years of the 2220s, the Kari finally began to put forth diplomatic feelers, and hostilities finally came to an end with the Epsilon Treaty of 2224. To many in the Earth Alliance, the removal of the Narn threat ended the last serious military risk to humanity. Earth's economic and military might now overshadowed all neighboring races with the exception of the Narn and Centauri, both of whom would never attack Earth without opening the door to an opportunistic counter-invasion by their hated rival. Even the threat of civil war had now been abated, as Proxima and the outer colonies seemed content to return to the old ways following a few needed concessions by Earthdome. Only Mars continued to seethe under the surface, but there was little they could do in the face of overwhelming Earth force might. Thus, in many ways, the Alliance was exactly where it wanted to be. A period of prosperity and peace settled in, and many optimists suggested that perhaps the risk of interstellar war had finally abated forever. But for Earth, these small encounters proved to be a blessing, as Earth Force was able to work out the kinks in their command and logistics systems. But sadly, in only a few short years, These lessons would be needed to fight in the Dilger War.